This 5-year-old girl had a special ability. Anything she said would come true. She said something to her sister. As a result, the sister died the next day. The girl's name was Clara. Since childhood, she had been gifted. She could see the future. Many people came to her. They all wanted Clara for fortune-telling. In front of her, a broke man asked her about the lottery. A troubled housewife went to her for advice. On this day, Clara fell in love at first sight with a man who came to her door to propose. So she moved the vase with her mind. To get his attention, the childish action was soon stopped by her mother. Because this man, Esther, was here to propose to her sister. But how could a poor man marry a noble lady like her sister? So, for the sake of his beloved, Esther left his home. He went to the wilderness to mine gold. One day, Clara screamed. Her sister arrived in a hurry. Clara said that death would soon come. The family didn't understand what she meant. Little did they know that the next day, her sister drank the poisoned wine sent by her father's political enemies. And she died. Even though Clara had nothing to do with it, she still felt guilty. She blamed herself for her sister's death. She decided never to speak again. At the funeral, she saw Esther again. He had made a lot of money in the north. He thought he would soon be able to fulfill his promise. Instead, he received the news that the love of his life had died. The lovebirds were separated forever. For the next 20 years, Clara was lost in her own world. She never said another word. Esther bought a farm. He left his mother and sister and came to this land. Many homeless natives were living here. He hired them to work day and night. He soon built a manor on the barren land, but loneliness always surrounded him. Early in the morning, he found a beautiful woman in the jungle, and he took her to his horse. Despite her pleas, he raped her. In 20 years, the land became the most productive estate in the country. Esther became arrogant and haughty. He believed that all the fruits were his own. He refused to pay his workers. That day, he received a letter from his sister. His mother had died. At the funeral, Esther saw Clara again. She was so beautiful. She reminded him of his former lover. And so, despite his sister's disagreement, he insisted on coming to Clara's house to propose. Clara was surprised by his arrival. She asked straight away, "You come to ask me to marry you, haven't you?" The first word she had spoken in 20 years. Her parents were surprised. They quickly agreed to marry their daughter to him. The marriage was a done deal, but on the eve of the wedding, Esther's sister asked Clara out on a date to stop the marriage because she didn't want to be kicked out of the family because of Clara. Clara's enthusiasm infected her. Not only did she ask the sister to move in with them, she said they would be like sisters. She had never felt such tenderness. She was so moved that she sobbed. The next day was Clara and Esther's wedding. They had a sweet married life. Her sister took care of their lives at home. She and Clara were like real sisters. They were so close that Esther was jealous. Soon, Clara was pregnant. Her parents wanted to visit her, but there was a car accident on the way. They couldn't even find the body. Clara was pregnant, but she could still use her power of prophecy. She led the police to the bodies, but the truth was too much for her. Soon, she gave birth to a baby girl named Bran. Another 7 years passed. On that day, the strangers came to the door of the manor. They demanded money from Esther. It turned out that one of them was the woman who had been raped by Esther, and the boy in front of her was his illegitimate son. Esther looked furious. He didn't want his peace to be shattered by the two. He fiercely handed the woman a pile of money, warning them not to come back. Compared with his ruthlessness, Clara was much kinder. She opened a schoolhouse on the estate. She taught the local children to read and write. Her daughter, Bran, also met Pedro, the steward's son. Once, Bran suddenly disappeared. Esther was furious because he found out that her daughter was seeing the housekeeper's son. He was furious and sent Bran away, and he closed Clara's school because he didn't want his daughter to marry a lowlife. He wanted her to live a life worthy of her identity, but that didn't stop Bran. Every summer she would return to the estate. She met secretly Pedro by the river. Esther didn't know anything about it. He had his eye on a young nobleman. He wanted to marry Bran to him. That day, when he returned home, he found his sister sleeping with Clara. His possessive nature got the better of him. He dragged his sister downstairs and threatened if she didn't leave, he would kill her. His sister was disappointed. Before leaving, she said he would die alone. Because of the sister, the relationship between the couple dropped to a freezing point. On the other side, Pedro was leading an uprising. The working class, led by him, and the real estate represented by Esther, broke into an irreconcilable conflict. For this reason, Esther flogged him mercilessly and threw him out of the estate. Esther thought he had given them everything, and these stupid low lives were ungrateful. No matter what Clara and her daughter said, he couldn't change his mind. At that moment, the candle suddenly went out. The sister came in with no expression. She kissed Clara on the cheek and left. Clara burst into tears because she knew the woman had died. The couple found her in a dilapidated hut. She had closed her eyes quietly. Meanwhile, the conflict between the workers and the landowners reached a climax. At the river, Esther found Bran and Pedro dating. He was furious and sent Bran away. He scolded his wife for not teaching her well. Not only did she not find a good match for Bran, but she also corrupted her mind to be with such a lone life. But Clara said, "You didn't marry a woman who was a good match either." That hit Esther hard. He slapped her across the face. Looking at her husband, Clara's disappointment was overwhelming. She closed herself off again. She didn't want to speak to her husband. She moved back to her parents' house with Bran. But soon, Esther received a telegram. Bran was pregnant. This threw his plans out of whack. Esther was furious and killed Pedro. He found Bran. He asked her to marry the man of his choice. The man was about to be a politician. At this point, he couldn't afford a scandal of any bastard. Bran disagreed. Once again, father and daughter fought in disagreement. Another few years, Esther was left alone. He had no one close to him. One day, missing his wife, he came to the house. He saw his granddaughter, Bran's daughter. The family Saturday together again. But Clara wouldn't talk to him. Each time, she asked the servant to deliver her message. Then Esther's illegitimate son came to him again. He asked him for money to join the army. After all these years, the so-called father was still not kind to him. When Esther gave him the money and kicked him out with disgust. As times changed, Esther's party lost. In the midst of the jubilant crowd, Bran finally met the love of his life. It turned out that Pedro was not dead. He had been fighting in the shadows. After a long separation, they hugged each other tightly. That Christmas, Clara was at peace with her death. She asked her granddaughter to tell Esther one day she would return and take him away with her. After the death of Clara, father and daughter lived in peace for a while, but it didn't last long. The political world was in turmoil again. Soldiers broke into the house and took Bran away, claiming that she was in contact with the criminal Pedro. Before she left, she had to beg her father to save her lover. Esther did all they could, but he was no longer as influential as he used to be. No one could help him now. Thinking of his daughter's sleep, so he asked someone to find Pedro in hiding. He risked his life sending Pedro abroad. Before leaving, Pedro hugged Esther. This was undoubtedly a tacit acceptance of his son-in-law's identity. The two men who had hated each other for years were finally reconciled. But he didn't know that Bran was tortured to death in prison, and the culprit was his illegitimate son. He took out his anger for all these years. He took it out on his sister. Just as Bran was dying, she seemed to see her old mother again. Inspired by Clara, a renewed desire for life, she stumbled home. She was delighted to hear from her father that Pedro was alive. Father and daughter embraced and wept. They returned to the abandoned estate. The place had been transformed into something else. In the haze, Esther seemed to see Clara again, touching his cheek tenderly. He knew she had come to fetch him. In the end, he didn't die alone like his sister, but he died in the familiar manner, in the arms of his lover. In the tones of inward pain, we have seen the history of a family, human nature. In this zone, all revealed. If you could have Clara's power, what would you most like to know? Tell me in the comments.